Well, good afternoon and welcome to MedTech Crossroads. Today is Friday, January 14th of, let's get this right, 2022. Today's our 88th show. We're glad to have you with us. Today we continue our month focusing on higher education in MedTech. As you know, this year we're spending a lot of time thinking in more of a series format to talk about education and investing and manufacturing and clinical experience and all these different things. And as we talk about education, we wanted to talk to the educators who are raising the next generation of folks working in the medtech industry. Last week, I was joined by Professor Jan Stegman, who we had a great conversation, lots of insights about teaching graduate students, folks who are passionate about learning. A little bit later today, I'm going to be talking with a student, an undergraduate student in biomedical engineering, who's going to join us on the show. Her name is Aman Tahir, and she'll be joining us in just a little bit to talk about her experience. So we're going to turn the tables a little bit on the professors and let the students have a voice too. It should be fun. Before that, though, COVID Connect, the COVID news, as always, we will bring the latest to you. After that, time permitting, we will take you behind the scenes. You may have noticed a little change here. MedTech Crossroads is adapting and growing. We're creating space here to do in-person interviews whenever that becomes an option. And we'll take you, for those of you who love technology, we're going to take you just a little bit behind the scenes. We've had people ask us, how do you run this? What's actually running under the hood? So for you tech geeks, stay tuned. It should be fun. With that, I'm going to take you to COVID Connect, the COVID news, COVID metrics and vaccine distribution from healthdata.gov. Before we go directly to that, though, I want to take you to this from CNN Health, this quote from Janet Woodcock, the acting FDA commissioner, where at a Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee hearing, she said, I think it's hard to process what's actually happening right now, which is most people are going to get COVID. And what we need to do is make sure the hospitals can still function, transportation, other essential services are not disrupted while this happens. Now, if you were watching the show last week, you know that we were cautiously expressing a little bit of optimism, which may have been too early placed. If you've been watching the news at all and hear the state of Michigan data, all red, of course, we know the caseload is going to expand. We know the cases are going to expand. But the big question here has been, will hospitalizations and deaths grow more quickly? Given that we know that Omicron is more virulent, but apparently less deadly. In fact, it appears to be perhaps a third as significant in terms of hospitalizations and deaths, but that's assuming a given case count. And so when we have a high case count, you can't say it's necessarily going to be lower. In fact, all these things are going up. The state of vaccination as it relates to transmission, not having a whole lot of effect, a very dark graph here. And in terms of new cases continuing to climb, in fact, a milestone that we haven't seen before on this next slide, for testing, the positivity rate is now in Michigan reaching 30%. That's the first time we've seen it anywhere near that high, except at the very beginning when things were just still getting adjusted and we hardly had any tests to go around. New deaths, we were talking internally, and it sure looks like a 7-day average, given the sporadicness of the data, may not be enough. CDC here is using a 7-day averaging line, but as you can see, the data is a lot noisier than that. And you can't say from that orange trend line that the deaths are going down. Maybe they've plateaued, maybe they're going up, but it's sadly what we're seeing with hospitalizations, the chances that they're going to continue to go up. In fact, speaking of hospitalizations, here's the data from Michigan. It sure looked for the last 2 weeks like hospitalizations might have dropped off. In fact, they had started to drop, but now right back up. Hospital admissions just a little bit higher than the peak about 4 weeks ago. So not great news there. Hospital admissions continuing to go up. Transmission in the state of Michigan, of course, still very, very high. And vaccinations actually starting to decline at this point. Vaccine administration, this national data, not the state of Michigan, this national data for vaccinations dropping through the 1 million doses per day line. Community transmission across the nation, still very much in the red. In fact, one of the lowest that we've ever seen it, or I should say highest transmission that we've ever seen it. And back to the hospitalization story, but this time nationally. I'm showing you last week's data. All right, so last week it was looking kind of cool. Like, well, there's only 5 states where they're flirting with that 20 patients per 100 beds with COVID. You've heard us say before that hospitals have to stay busy. They have to stay about 80% full. So an extra 20 patients is kind of that magic number for where things really get tight and hard. And last week we could say that only about 5 states were really flirting with that line. This week, 22 states are in that sort of 15 plus beds per 100 beds thing. So this has changed dramatically just over the last week. We want to call out some credit here to those hospital systems that are creating these really neat infographics. This one from the University of Michigan, Michigan Medicine, we had a chance to pull this and the one from Spectrum Health in both these cases. Michigan has gone a step beyond here in that they are showing not only that there are 128 hospitalized individuals with COVID, but the percentage that are vaccinated versus unvaccinated, and the ones that have a comorbidity. People often didn't seem to want to talk about the comorbidities. Now it's front and center. So in fact, you can see that of those 49 who are vaccinated, all but, shall we say, about 8 or 9 are, looks like 9, all but 9 have comorbidities. Of the 79 who are unvaccinated, about half of them have comorbidities and about half of them do not. In the ICU, it's similar types of percentages. Most of the vaccinated individuals have comorbidities. About half of the unvaccinated individuals have comorbidities. On ventilation, a similar story. Most of the vaccinated individuals have comorbidities. Less than half of the unvaccinated individuals have comorbidities. Here's the only wild card that we know of at the moment, which is that hospitals still are not segregating whether a patient was admitted and then discovered to have COVID, so a car crash and then discovered to have COVID, or whether this is a sanitized list of people who are really in wrestling with COVID. So we just don't know right there. As many as 40% of patients we have understood come in and then are discovered to have COVID. So there's a little wild card there, but kudos to Michigan Medicine for actually giving us more insight into what is happening with these patients. This dashboard, likely based on the very good one put out by Spectrum Health a few months ago, and this updated for January 11th. Spectrum of hospitalized COVID-19 patients, 76% unvaccinated, 89% vaccinated. They did add this interesting bullet point below that on average their vaccinated patients are 11 years older and have an average of 5 comorbidities compared to an average of 2 comorbidities for unvaccinated patients. High percentage unvaccinated in the ICU, even higher on ventilation. So seeing those trends there. They don't have the comorbidities spelled out, but certainly kudos to Spectrum for diving into that and giving us a little more detail on what the status is there. We wanted to pass this on too, this from MLive reporting on the Food and Drug Administration, telling people to stop using the Lucis Laboratories COVID-19 antigen test and the Lucis Laboratories COVID-19 IgG and IgM antibody test due to the high risk of false results. Now, I wish I could report that this were just an ongoing discovery that had suddenly come to light, but it actually turns out that FDA says that these products being marketed under the names Lucient Diagnostics or Vivera Pharmaceuticals or with the trade name Eagle DX, performance has not been adequately established, says the FDA. These tests haven't been authorized, cleared, or approved by the FDA for distribution or use in the US. So we actually have a bit of an issue here. So in that search for that home test that you may be out there looking for, want to get your hands on, if you see these names come up, sounds best to steer clear. There are those names. Again, Lucient Diagnostics or Vivera Pharmaceuticals or the trade name Eagle DX. And that is the COVID news for today. We'll give just a moment in case there's any questions or thoughts there. I hope you're all doing well, staying well clear of this. Next up, we're just having our guest rejoin us here as a panelist. So we'll just give her a moment to join. And while she is, I just want to mention that we are spending all the month of January focusing on education. We had realized that we focus a lot on the startup side of things, on the investment side of things, on the manufacturing side of things. We didn't get all the way back to how are people coming into this industry? How are they learning about this industry? And it's something that our universities and our educators are focused on. And last week we had Dr. Jan Stegman join us. Wonderful chat. You can go back and watch it on YouTube as soon as it's posted there. But this week, I am joined by Aman Tahir. Aman, welcome.
Hi, Gene. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with us. We really appreciate it. It's going to be kind of fun because we're just sitting here talking about education, and now all the professors have to listen to you. So this is going to be great.
For sure.
Aman, I'm going to let you tell your story. I'd love for you to tell us about what you're doing. You're a biomedical engineering student at the University of Michigan. A little bit about what you're doing and about how you got there. What has been your educational history that brought you to this point where you're pursuing sort of the MedTech world as something?
For sure. So as Gene said, I am a biomedical engineering student. For basically most of my life, I've always wanted to go into the medical field. So I do intend on becoming a surgeon one day. So I have a lot, I really like to interact with my patients, but I've also always had interest in STEM and like math and sciences. And I didn't know about the biomedical engineering field until very late, like maybe the year I was applying to college. And so I wanted to study something that I could apply my science to my future medical career. And this was like an amazing major to do exactly that. And I want to do that in my future.
That's really cool. How early did you know you wanted to go into medicine?
Pretty early, like probably like age 6 or 7.
Wow, that's really cool. It's nice to know it, and then to find that, I guess really nothing dissuaded you along the way. And that actually says something that because sometimes we'll get an exposure to something and it'll turn us off to it. So have all your educational experiences continued to move you towards that, or has there been anything that kind of made you stop and pause?
No, I think everything that I've done can be contributed to the like I'm a surgeon specifically. Like I want to be a surgeon. Everything I've learned can contribute to me being a surgeon, and I like to look at my life that way. So all my experiences kind of built towards that, and I have that passion for it. So I think
That's
nothing has
really cool.
persuaded me.
That's really cool. I remember my dad has always told me everything is connected somehow. It sounds like you've got that same philosophy, like every little bit still points you towards that goal.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, tell us a little bit about what year you are at U of M Biomedical Engineering School, and what have been some of your favorite experiences thus far?
So I'm a junior in terms of class status, but I think I actually was a freshman last year, just in terms of years. So my year started off online, unfortunately, because of COVID. So I think the classes were fine for me, but it was hard like making friends and like connecting with people. I did make one really good friend who I actually went camping with over the summer. But now that we're back in person, it's a little bit nicer to see actually like meet your teachers and go to the office hours. And it's a better connection and it's a better time for me to be in person.
So you actually started your college career virtual.
Yep.
Wow, that must be really intense because usually it's all those things of getting to know the campus, getting to know the
Yeah.
people that really orients you. But you seem to be doing really well with that. You're involved with a project that's under a broader banner is called M-Heal, and the specific project under that is called MESA. Tell us a little. This is extracurricular, or at least it's something that's elective. You didn't have to do this. It's in addition to your classwork. Tell us a little bit about these kinds of programs that are being run.
So I actually heard about M-Heal in general when I went to campus day and visited the BME department, and they talked about it. I said, wow, this is like this organization, they make medical devices to help underserved communities in the world. This is exactly something that's up my alley. I want to do this. So I knew like from that day, I was like, I need to go and join this organization. And then I ended up joining second semester of my freshman year. And essentially M-Heal is like the umbrella organization. We have 11 project teams. I'm actually the secretary of M-Heal, so I work on the administrative side as well. And Project MESA specifically, I wanted to join because it has a big focus in preventative healthcare. So we make cervical cancer screening tables for women in under low resource communities. And oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, keep going. I'm going to ask you some more questions about M-Heal in a second, so tell us all you can.
Yeah, so Project Mesa is has been like an amazing way for me to start like learning engineering right from the beginning. You know, the beginning classes are usually more like foundation stuff like math, sciences, but in Mesa I actually got to learn CAD and things like skills like that very early on.
That's really cool. And so just to make sure our audience is clear on this, M-Heal is a whole series of projects focusing on low resource settings. And you guys are taking student teams, and it sounds like all the way from freshman year up through, would it be accurate to say graduate students? This I'm not clear on.
We do have some graduate students.
Okay. And you all are developing products. You're going in country to low resource settings. You're working with folks to bring uh, generations of these devices to them. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so MESA, you said cervical screening table. What have been some of the things that you have gotten to do with that project?
So in the beginning, when I first joined, I actually helped to make some of the assembly manuals for our latest prototype. I also was taught CAD by some of the leads. And then this coming fall, I actually took charge of a new initiative to make a sustainable table that could be produced in one of the countries that we're working with. And so I've been leading on that and trying to get, basically that project came because our goals are, we're engaged with socially engaged design, and we want to make sure that everything that we do benefits the community. So I just felt like if we can establish the table in that country, it'll have a better chance of surviving, like outliving us essentially.
Mm, that's really cool. It's neat how you're throwing yourself into this, right? You found this opportunity. You described it as, oh wow, I have to get involved with this. Here I go. That's a high level of initiative, and I think oftentimes students don't always show that. I have to say that's a very exceptional thing to just be reaching out, grabbing this opportunity, grabbing that opportunity. When you and I chatted earlier, Aman, I think you actually said, I feel like that has to be part of the learning. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I think with what you learn in class, a lot of it is, you know, it's either like textbook or problems, and that is obviously good information to know before you go out and do that thing in the real world. But I think the best way to learn is actually to do it yourself on a project, something that you're passionate about, because now you can apply what you've learned. And I think in people's brains, and especially in my brain, like that's what actually I remember. That's what helps me learn and move forward. And it's really important for every student, I think, to have that experience.
That's really critical. We were talking with Dr. Stegman, runs the biomedical engineering graduate course. And I remember when we were talking, I was saying, well, how do students respond? You got good students, you got bad students. And he was like, well, by the time they get to my class, they've sort of self-selected and they're passionate about this kind of thing. They know they came here to learn. And then, interestingly enough, doing the same kind of thing that you're describing. So we're seeing, even with just these first two shows that we've done in this education series, we're hearing from an educator saying, people need this freedom to work in this white space to explore open-ended problems. And now, Aman, you're saying, yeah, I need a place to apply these things that I'm learning. It's not just enough to learn it in the class. So that's really cool.
Thank you.
What would you say? So you're here, you're driven, you want to be a surgeon, you're doing BME, you're reaching out to Mesa, you're getting this experience, which from what I know of these programs, um, and obviously Professor Ken Alfano, an old dear friend of mine and colleague as well, who I know you've worked with. Um, you're driven for this. What sorts of things would you say to students? Maybe they have motivation, but they don't know where to apply it. What sorts of things would you recommend that have helped you learn to internalize things that you would say to your co-students and say, you should be thinking about it this way. Apply your energy here and here and here generically.
I think one thing I would encourage people to do is do a lot of like self-visioning about where they want to be in their careers and what they want to do, and then like make out goals and plans as what resources or opportunities can I be a part of that will like lead me a little bit a step forward towards my goal in the future. I find a lot of people lack that sort of visioning, and they're very like focused on what they're doing right at the moment. But I think
Mm,
it's important to have a long-term goal or vision that you're working towards, because it provides like you can stay grounded, you won't like lose focus, or you know where to look essentially, but you should always be open to new opportunities that arise as well. So I know when I joined, I tried to like I knew I wanted to be in like the BME health space, so I looked up like yeah, these are the organizations and which ones align with my values, and I found MHeal and I was like, I got to do this. So it's
jumping in,
been
gotta go.
yeah.
So that's you said visioning and thinking about where do I want to be and what will help me get there. Um, I know you'd also mentioned earlier, like this idea of public speaking, of getting out there and being vocal about things. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I think not only like academics and like career wise, you should focus, but you should also focus on yourself as a person. Find like other opportunities like public speaking. I did like debate in high school, I did mock trial, I did theater, like a lot of just other things that added to my confidence in speaking, working with other people, getting exposure to different ideas I could draw on in the future. So it's things like that that people I think maybe discount and say, oh, this is not really related to my career, so maybe I'm just not gonna do them. But I think I would encourage everyone to do something on the side that isn't like directly related to what their career is, because it provides a lot of value.
That's really cool. In fact, it reminds me, I'm sort of in my own head as we talk about these educational topics. I'm putting together these trends and these things that I see people sort of repeating. And that was one of Dr. Stegman's points last week was students graduating, going into industry often don't know how to sort of express what it is that they do and how they fit into things. And you're saying get all these experiences so that they all sort of can blend together and relate you and place you. And yeah, you'll never go wrong getting those experiences. That's
Sure.
great. Well, now we come to the question that everyone wants to know. Aman, you're sitting in this chair, and you have a lectern that now is on equal par with your educators. What would you tell them? Put you on the spot. What has been helpful to you? What has not been helpful to you?
I think I really enjoy professors or teachers who can relate the content that they're teaching in class and how it applies in real life. A lot of the times, like especially going through high school, like in like math sequences, I really like math, but I always found myself wondering like, when can I use this? What, where do I apply this? And when I learned, I was like, oh, okay, this makes so much more sense. And I wish they had told me that before. And I know that's a complaint from like a lot of kids. They're like, what is the point of me even learning this? So I think teachers could do a better job of like highlighting that. I also think this is a whole system as a whole thing, but education should be a little bit more tailored to the individual. I think kids have a hard time like breaking out and trying to find new things for themselves. So maybe we could shape a little bit and help individually. I know that's what like office hours are for, but it is hard to encourage people to come to those as well. So I can see problems from both sides. I think those two are probably like my big main things.
Well, and that second one that you mentioned is so interesting because the challenge of there are people available, right? I mean, anybody who's an educator, anybody who's out in industry, often is more than willing to share and to educate and stuff like that. This office hours concept, right? But as learners, whoever we may be, whatever stage we may be at, we often don't know the question to ask. We often don't know what to say other than, I feel a little lost. I don't know what to do next. And of course, you never want to ask quite that open-ended a question. You always want to direct that question and tailor it down. But that seems to get back to your other point about students sort of knowing where they would like to be. Only the student can say, this is where I want to get. And then it seems like it helps you to ask more tailored questions of your educators. I don't know. How do you think about that process of what question? Because so many students out there are like, I just don't even know what to ask. I don't even know what to say next.
That
How do you find that question?
I definitely does happen to me. Like there's like sometimes there's concepts and I'm like, oh my God, like where do I start? But I think the best way is like go to office hours and say I'm struggling with this concept. And then if like the professor can give like some background information and explain it differently than how they explain it in class. Because if you didn't get it in class, it's probably because that explanation didn't make sense to you. So definitely like getting a different explanation, and then once you have something from there, then ask a little bit more focused questions. Go back and try like the problems, like that's on the students to try problems and then find which areas they're having trouble with and then bring that to the professor. And then it's like it's a two-way street. Like it really is. And we could improve on our end and they can improve on their end, you know.
Well, it sounds like you're doing your part and getting out there and reaching out for those things, which I just think is so inspiring. And we always, sometimes people are like, why do you have the show on Friday afternoons? And a lot of times it's because when we talk to people like you, we're going to go into this weekend feeling great because it's like here's somebody who's pushing forward and really making things happen, which I just think is so cool. We had a question here actually from David. I'm gonna open his line in case he wants to ask the question live. I'll give him a few seconds to see if he's in a position to come live. If he's not, that's fine. I'll ask the question for him. But David, your line is open if you want to ask your question of Aman, and if not, in about 5 seconds, I will ask it for you.
Hey there, how is my audio coming through?
You're just fine, David. Welcome.
All right, fantastic. These are really great, excellent responses so far. I'm glad, on that you put the thought into the questions that you have. It's very endearing to hear these, having been, a student myself in the BME department at U of M and now working more as a postdoc in the university. I did have two questions for you, and again, feel free to address in either order. The first is, have you thought about a BME concentration yet? So like the electrics, the mechanics, etc. And then the second is, one of the core engineering concepts is design, build, test, and then iterate. And given that your first year at the university was remote, have you had a chance to try and build anything in a remote setting or like without a formal engineering lab? So I can see how design would be more easily doable remotely. And given this iterative cycle, have you had a chance to actually think about how you could apply like building processes in a potentially remote environment without the same type of engineering responses or resources that are available?
Well, thank you. Those are really good questions. As terms of the concentrations, I think it's going to probably be like tissue engineering and medical device development, just because that fits more closely with surgery and like the types of like implants and devices that I would be working with. So it's probably going to be those two. And in terms of your other question, I know like first year we were supposed to build something, but we were not in person. So they had us like go through the process of like design this and what would the diagrams be. But I don't know, like it's like goes back to my point of, yes, I know what to do, but not necessarily like when I actually, like if I had to do it in real life, it'd be a little confusing for me because I didn't do it in person. But it's actually because of Mesa now that we're back in semester and starting the sub team, that sustainable table that I was talking about. That design process is getting started from the beginning. So I will have the chance to make those concept sketches, put it into the CAD, and then eventually we'll make the table in real life. And that whole design process will occur finally because I'm in person. And in terms of building, our other prototype is going to get built this semester also. So that will be like first time using like manufacturing processes and things like that.
Great answers. And David, thank you for joining us to ask that live. Appreciate it. That's wonderful. We'll see if any of our guests or our audience has any questions for you, Aman. But this has been really cool, really fun. I'm wondering if you have any other thoughts for our audience, other things as we're sitting here thinking about education more broadly and people moving into delivering value in the MedTech community. You're going to go off become a surgeon. I hope when you do that, I love your focus of like, wow, I'm working with devices. I should understand how devices are made. I love that because there's so many surgeons who don't actually understand that. And that'll be a tremendous asset to the entire community. If you ever want to go on to FDA, it'd be nice to have somebody who understands how things work at the FDA. We always like that. And actually, before I have you make your final statement, there is one other question here from one of our audience, Ken Spencer. Ken, you're live.
Yes, thanks, Gene. And what a fun way to go into the weekend, as you pointed out, to see such a bright and energetic person who knows exactly what she wants to do and is there right where she wants to be. I'm kind of reminded of, and she made this point of like high school classes and things like that. And I think any of us who have had kids know how enthusiastic they were in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, and somewhere along the line, school became a chore. And I think that she hit it right on nail on the head in terms of you end up taking things just to take things, and you don't understand how relevant they are to the real world out there, and I just applaud her for finding her vocation there. And we have something she may be interested in over at MCirc. We work with Rocky, Dr. Rocky, as we call him, who is really involved in Uganda. And so here we have an area that has very little tech. How do we help people over there? And primarily we've been focused on TBI, but I would be happy if you would share my email with her. I could put her in touch with Rocky. He would absolutely love to have such an enthusiastic person, talking.
That's awesome. Yeah, happy to make introductions afterwards. Aman, I think you also just got an internship offer here from Kevin, if you look in the chat. So we'll certainly make introductions. We will also ask that question. We will have more people on from BME as well as from the university. Kevin's question of how do we contact the department to find people like Aman? How do we get access to people? It's really neat because there is this desire, this hunger to make these connections. People are looking for people who are well-trained, enthusiastic to come out and join efforts, and folks like you, Aman. So it's pretty cool. I'm gonna go back to you for your. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, and then I'll come.
Well, I was gonna say, if you're always looking for people like who want socially engaged design and looking for those engineers who are gonna have that training, MHEAL, like I can vouch for them. Like everyone in there is like really motivated, and if you want people like that, I can always connect you and we can do that. So
That's awesome. Well, we'll make some of those connections starting today. It's one of our favorite things about this show is making these little connections, a couple connections every show. We just love doing it and build that community because that's what it's about. These conversations that you didn't know you needed to have until you had them. So it's always fun. Well, let me give you the last word, Aman. What are your parting thoughts for this group as we, as sort of a MedTech community, providers, investors, manufacturers, educators, everybody who's trying to deliver healthcare technology? What do you want us to remember?
I think one thing that is a conversation, even for engineering as a whole, but especially in our industry, is like ethics and like working with communities. Because if you don't, like, oftentimes we don't really connect with the people that we're providing these devices for, the patients. Like for me, example, like I'm an EMT, so I get patient contact. I know who I'm working with, but like maybe other people have not. And so when we build these devices and maybe don't think about like who they're affecting, it can lead to like problems in the future. Or I mean, in past, like there have been like research studies that are unethical and things that have happened. And I do believe part of that is because we didn't connect with those people and actually like see who we're providing those devices to. So I think those conversations are really, really important to have. And I know that's something that we strive to have, those conversations within MPL and our project teams. But as a whole, I think every one of us should remember that. And yeah, I'm gonna leave it with that.
That's awesome. Aman, we really appreciate having you here today. Thank you for your very clear words and your clear vision. We wish you the best in your time. We hope that our paths will cross again and we can interact in many different ways. And so, welcome to the MedTech community. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for everyone for saying such nice comments.
Thanks for being with us today. I'll make those connections. We'll have you turn your video and audio off, but feel free to stay with us for the remainder of the show, where we're going to do a little something fun here in the next few minutes ahead of us. And that is, you may have noticed a few changes around the studio here. We've actually moved where we keep our primary studio. And as we've been talking about changes coming to MedTech Crossroads in 2022, we wanted to show you a little bit of the tech behind this show that we run. So this is the MedTech Crossroads behind the scenes. And to help me do this, I want to welcome my good friend and colleague, Steve Minus, to the show, who is going to bring himself in here somehow through some amazing technological prowess, I think. Is this going to work, Steve?
Oh, probably. There we go.
There he is. There's Steve himself. Steve is one of our wonderful folks here, electrical design at Into Being. A real wonderful designer, but also a wonderful guy at running audio and video, and he and I've collaborated over this last year and a half, putting together the tech for this show. I'm trying to remember, Steve, I think the first time we ran a MedTech Crossroads, I don't know if it was just me and my laptop, or maybe we had a camera there plugged in via USB. I think that was pretty much what we did. What's your recollection?
Yeah, I think it did start real basic with just, I am echoing.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
okay.
Oh, there's the tech again. Well, things have graduated a little bit.
Yeah,
We're still
we've upgraded a little bit.
playing with tech. But this today is the room that I'm sitting in. We've expanded our space here to have room when the time comes for in-person guests here next to me. We have additional cameras accessible. I don't know, Steve, if you can show our panelist chairs over here with that
I think we can take a look.
camera over there, which is really, really cool. I'll take you on some other pictures here as well. We've had some people ask us, what's actually happening behind the scenes, and we're not ones to sort of hide information. We believe that information should be free and work should be compensated, and we wanted to just sort of share some of this. We're using some mid-grade I believe they're Sony cameras that we've had for a number of years, these NX cams that are running the video from MedTech Crossroads. More recently, we've created the studio space with a separate control room to run these shows. Steve, this is one of your I think prides and joys that we're showing on the screen right now. Tell us a little bit, for those who are tech geeks, what we're looking at here.
Yeah, we're looking at kind of in the middle of the desks. There is a video
Just take
switch.
your headphones off and tell us.
Yeah, there we go. We've got a video switcher in the foreground here. We have the multi-views which show all of our inputs. In fact, I can probably treat them to a treat of what I'm looking on that screen there now. And we have some nice inception going as it feeds back on itself. But yeah, we've just got we got a video switcher, we've got a couple of laptops we can bring in, now bring in remote participants. I was starting to do a little bit of that today here, where we can put them in and bring them in the screen there with Gene and just get a little bit more flexibility. We've also got the option for some live cameras here. We can bring in, obviously, our studio camera live, which doesn't look real live right now, but it is. So yeah, we've just got the ability to bring people in live, whether in studio or calls, and just make the best of it here.
And if you're running a podcast with a single camera and you've got somebody helping you with tech, this is the best Christmas present that you can get them late after Christmas. This is the world of video switching has become amazingly democratized. This from Black Magic, who's made their world of selling hardware and increasingly accessible hardware. Steve, tell just a few words about what this is.
Yeah, this is a video switcher that allows you to just kind of layer multiple video sources on top of each other. I mean, we could, let me see here, let me grab Gene. We can, instead of looking at me, we can fade over to Gene here, or we can bring us back in. And yeah, it's just, I've got 8 video inputs here, plus I have some options for just like image sources like we've got in the background and the logo and stuff, just to kind of bring it in and give it a little bit more interesting look and just give it a little bit more professional feel to it all.
Yeah, it's really cool. So for those of you who had asked and said, what are you actually running behind the scenes? We've got some digital light panels just off of Amazon that do a pretty good job for illuminating the space. Obviously, you need a lot of light to make video like this work. And so I'm thankful, Steve, for all your help. It's always nice to give a shout out here for the guy behind the scenes every week of this show. Steve, I appreciate your help with it. And yeah, what we're really looking forward to in the future is being able to host more group discussions as we get into some of these series, to bring in more folks in multiples to have these discussions, some in studio, some brought in separately. So we look forward to doing more of that. Also interested to hear from you. What are the topics that you're interested in? As we talk about these series, and I'm sorry I put the slide up last week, but I don't have it this week. We talk about series, about education, about investing, about acceleration resources, about vendors, about manufacturing, about regulatory, about clinical trials and how you do stuff like that, about intellectual property and how you move that forward. We always want to hear from you. Who do you want to hear from? Who do you want to see me interview here? What kinds of questions do you have? You can help us plan those shows. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your inputs. And as we come here to the top of the hour, I want to leave the time open for any questions or comments, as well as community announcements. And I just realized that we did forget to include one thing here, which I'm going to pop up on the screen for us momentarily. But while I do that, feel free to raise a hand and to tell us if you know of any community events that are happening that you would like folks to know about in the community. I'm about to bring up something from the FDA that we did promise we were going to share with you today. And we'll bring that right over here. Hopefully, Steve, that is showing up for our audience. I'm sorry for the messiness of that. Is everyone getting to see that? Looks like we're good. Yeah, this very perhaps unimpressive looking page is the registration page. The address here we'll post in the chat, but it's nih.zoomgov.com. And this is a regulatory science tools webinar. And this is from, it was passed on to us by Anya Roberts, who is part of a company called FedTech. And they are having on the, let's see, the date is not here. It's January 19th is the first installment of this. There is an FDA regulatory science tools webinar happening. You can read the description here, but it's actually in 3 parts. The first part here having to do with tools to reduce the need to design ad hoc test methods and allow developers to focus their limited resources on technology development and not method development. The second event, part 2, there's the January 19th date down there, 1 p.m. Part 2, Phantoms tools. Many of you who have been involved in device development know that Phantoms can be useful for proving at a bench level your device's functionality. Well, they're going to have a Phantoms tools part 2 of this on February 16th. And then a month later, on March 16th, computational modeling tools, evaluating the safety and performance specifically of blood contacting medical devices. So all of these, getting to that basic question that we've talked about many times on the show before, how do I go about testing and verifying and validating my device? Oh, there's some amazing techniques out there, but oftentimes the question comes back, is this model validated? How did you prove that your test was even valid? I think we're going to hear a little bit about some of those in this event. So again, part 1, looking at tools, perhaps more generically, on January 19th. Part 2, looking at Phantoms on February 16th. And part 3, looking at computational modeling tools on March 16th. So one this month, one next month, and one the month after. We will take and paste this link into the chat for those of you who are interested in having access to that. It appears to be a free webinar that you can attend. So with that, and we'll paste it into the chat, I'll just hold for a moment to see if anybody has a comment or a question that you would like to share with us. There is our topics list that Steve just popped up for us. We do have a raised hand. Our friend Ken Spencer.
Yes, Gene. So thank you. Very informational episode as usual. I loved the second level data that was shown in your COVID-19 presentation there from
from U of M. Yep.
Informative. Unfortunately, I just posted a link that came online from West Virginia University where they have stopped sharing data on COVID stuff, right? So it's kind of confusing when you get great second level data like you showed versus people who are stopped sharing data.
Oh my goodness. We're going to pop this up. We're going to pop your link up here on the screen for everyone to see, because that's just how we roll. I think it's showing here, if Steve can tell me that it is. Whoops, I just made it go away. Sorry, that's on me. This is all the fun tech stuff. There's some holiday pictures you didn't necessarily want to see. Where did it go there? We just lost our graphic. We're going to pop it back up here again.
I mean,
do keep talking there, Ken, though, because we'll bring this up here momentarily.
Pushback from the students and faculty at WVU is pretty interesting. It's kind of like they're adopting the ostrich strategy here. And that is in direct conflict, I think, with what you showed, from U of M and Spectrum and stuff, which is really fascinating, a deeper dive into that data. And it is so important, I think, if we're going to move forward on this stuff.
That's
So,
kind of amazing. So they're saying we're not going to share, just reading from, again, this is just to give credit where credit is due. This is the student newspaper at WVU saying West Virginia University will no longer share publicly the number of students and employees who test positive for COVID-19. Testing, quarantine, and isolation data will not be reported for the spring 2022 semester. And of course, this testing data, not necessarily the hospitalization data, but still kind of an interesting move there, isn't it?
yes, totally different than U of M reports, on a regular basis, that's out there. And so it is interesting just to see the different approaches there, but I just love the data slides that you put up earlier that I think need to be shared with like everybody, out there.
We're glad for the organizations that are willing to take the time out of their busy schedules to try to communicate and to do it in a graphical way that makes sense. Ken, thanks for that link and thanks for the comments. If you're on the chat, you can get those links, the one that Ken just shared for the West Virginia University link to their decision to stop sharing COVID data about their staff and student population, as well as the NIH link for their 3-part educational webinar series for those interested in testing of various sorts and reporting those tests to the FDA. Great. Really appreciate it, everyone. It's been a really fun show. We do have just a couple minutes left. I'll leave it open for another 30 seconds in case we have any community announcements that you are aware of coming up. I'll do one more check there on that. There was an announcement recently for those of you who know the A2 Biosocial event. The next A2 Biosocial, I'm sorry we didn't have a slide on this, but sponsored by our friends over at Rapid Bio. They will be having a biosocial on, oops, I'm sorry, they just had one. I think there should be one coming up. I'm not sure why it's not showing up. They are looking at February 8th. There's the date, folks. A2 Biosocial, rain, shine, or Omicron. They will either be meeting digitally or at the Holmes Brewery location February 8th. So they also have a new Slack channel for keeping the biosocial discussions going, so you can look that up. You can find all of that either by talking to somebody over at Ann Arbor Spark or through the MishBio website. Biosocial obviously sponsored the last month by Rapid Bio, but ongoing, presented by Ann Arbor Spark, My Lead Consulting, and MishBio. So we're thankful for all of these venues, all these opportunities. And as always, we're so glad to have you here today. We'll continue our educational series next week with Jonathan Fay. He's with University of Michigan, and he's going to talk to us about some of the later stage educational offerings that they have at the University of Michigan, among which is I-Core. If you haven't heard of I-Core, you need to. It's a very, very important customer discovery program that allows people to learn how to talk to people about whether the product that they're thinking about is needed. So we'll talk about that coming out of the University of Michigan next week. I want to thank you all for being here with us. Have a wonderful day. We'll talk to you next week on MedTech Crossroads. Bye-bye.